Today on CityCast Denver. We are 4 days into the new year, and there's so much going on in Denver already. From the busted Broncos to buses full of people showing up on our city's doorstep, me and producer Paul Caroli are ready to break it all down. Today is Wednesday, January 4th, 2023. I'm Bree Davies, and this is CityCast Denver. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Bree.
Good to hear from you.
Yeah, you too. It's nice to be back.
It's been a while. It's 2023. We're thinking about what's happening in Denver right now. And I think we wanted to just talk about a couple stories that caught our eye over the last couple of weeks and are ongoing and happening now. And
honestly, I could use the help sorting through all this stuff. There's so much happening.
Totally. Because like we were talking about, before Christmas break, for whatever that means for folks, or holiday break, a lot of things are at a lull. There's not necessarily new legislation. We're not looking. This is sort of a lull time in general for, I think, most places. It's a time of respite. But we're coming back into it, and there's a ton of stuff to talk about. I think we should talk about the most pressing issue for Denver, the Broncos.
Uh-huh. I guess so. Yeah, for a lot of people, it was pressing. They've had, they've had quite a season, but the last couple of weeks has been exciting. I've been feeling schadenfreude over it.
Yeah.
Have you been watching?
No, of course not. Because all I do is read the headlines about how bad it is. It's like when you want, it's like the schadenfreude is you're talking about, the thing where it's like, we knew it was going to be bad, so I'm going to watch it be bad, But really, what was the biggest news? Well,
the biggest news is that the coach, Nathaniel Hackett, who they hired right before this season, he's out. They fired him. It was one particularly embarrassing defeat, 51-14 loss to the LA Rams and their backup quarterback, Baker Mayfield, who, by the way, the Broncos could have signed. Like, he started the season on a different team and was just like released. Anyone could have signed him, but LA did, and he's been lighting it up for them, and he destroyed the Broncos. So they fired Hackett, and now they're in this sort of holding pattern of what to do. They got this interim head coach, Jerry Rosberg, this old dog NFL veteran guy coming in to finish out the season for them. But now it's up to this ownership group and George Patton, who runs the football operations, to figure out what to do. Like, who do we hire to be the next head coach, and maybe even more importantly, what to do about Russell Wilson and his $250 million contract that they signed before the season that looks worse and worse.
I know. I was just thinking when you were sort of talking about the quarterback for the Rams, Baker Mayfield. Great name, by the way.
Terrific.
I bet he didn't cost. I bet he didn't cost them $250 million.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. He probably is playing for cheap.
We'll definitely have deeper analysis on what this all means for Denver, but I think in general, it looks like, can we have a do-over? Can we start?
Just clean house.
Can we start this over? Because we had high hopes, and interesting though. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I would like to take this moment to say the Nuggets are crushing it. So again, I will offer up, if the Broncos make you sad, go watch the Nuggets. We have a great team right now.
Now's the time.
Aaron Gordon is so fun to watch.
I saw the video of that dunk on Christmas Day.
Oh my God. I didn't want to bring it up. It's because it's kind of salacious, the dunk, because Aaron Gordon, I don't remember who they were playing. He does this Superman, one of those moments where you're like, how are basketball players human beings? Because he just flies through the air.
Gordon! Oh my goodness!
Oh! But he hits the dude who's trying to block him in the face with his junk. And then he falls on top of him. He's just like, oops, sorry. it's so worth a watch. You can search Aaron Gordon dunk and it will come up. Also, Jokic is looking like possibly a three-peat, third-time MVP if we're lucky. So I don't know.
That would be incredible.
I will again advocate. The Nuggets are fun to watch. They're a great team. Michael Malone is a wonderful coach. He has this really nice dad vibe. energy where he's like, I want you to do good. I'm disappointed sometimes, but I still love you. Like that's his vibe. And I really appreciate that in a coach.
Do you think they got a chance to make a run this year?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, another MVP trophy would be nice, but let's talk about a championship. Is it possible?
Yes, they're number one in the Western Conference right now. I think they could. Absolutely. Jokic runs circles around everybody. Jamal Murray's back. I mean, good stuff. Good stuff to watch.
All right, so let's switch gears here for a second to a story that has been developing slowly over the last month or so. I have to admit, I didn't really have my eyes on this one, but now it seems like kind of a big deal. Bree, can you explain what's happening with all these migrants, like busloads of migrants arriving in Denver?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit it on the head here, Paul, which is what we've been watching this slowly unfold. And it still, honestly, it feels like there's still a piece of this story missing that we don't know, or that is not being reported. So back in December, early December, hundreds of folks started showing up. We learned now that a lot of them are coming from Venezuela. I know some of them have been traveling, so they may not be Venezuelans, but they're definitely coming from Venezuela.
Okay.
Thousands of folks have shown up in Denver. At this point, over 3,500 people have showed up in Denver since December 9th.
That's a lot of people.
And so the city sort of sprang into action like we need emergency shelter, we need translators, we need service navigation, food, clothes. I mean, all these basic things turned several rec centers into sort of temporary shelters. We're now like a month into this.
I saw they opened the Coliseum up like they did during the pandemic.
Right. So it's continuing to be a pressure on Colorado for sure. We don't get federal funding for services like this because we're not a border town. So we generally just don't have support from the federal government on this. So the city's been trying to deal with it. The state has also been trying to deal with it.
Okay.
And I thought it was really interesting. Axios recently reported that Governor Polis is busing some of these folks to other major cities like New York and Chicago. And I think the criticism here is Republican governors like Abbott in Texas and Ron DeSantis in Florida also did something similar last year that people were very critical of.
Yeah, I remember it was like big publicity stunts at the time. That's kind of what I assumed was happening with the migrants coming here. I thought they were coming from Florida or Texas. That's obviously not the case, but now Polis is doing that?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to excuse him or say it's like not just as bad, but he's not doing it as a publicity stunt. These folks are showing up here, and I think he probably doesn't really know what else to do. The strain on our shelter system in general is already pretty tough.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to that. As a sense of the scale of the issue of like the demand for these services. The last point in time survey, which is the count of our unhoused population every year around Christmas time. The last one, the data showed that there was about 6,000 people living unhoused on the streets of Denver. So if we're getting 3,500 migrants who are now, using these same services and using some of these same facilities, that's a huge strain. It's a huge strain on this system that's already, pushed to the brink.
That's what some advocates for unhoused folks are saying, or people that work within these systems is like, hey man, we already have limited resources to help our unhoused neighbors that live here already. So adding 3,500 more people is just a lot in a limited amount of time. And when we talk about resources, I think it's important to say, okay, the state government's also projecting, or Colorado's projecting that this is going to cost us about $3 million. But if we think about the other resources, like the human beings needed to navigate these situations, the translators, the caseworkers, the folks that just run the shelters, that's the kind of burden I think that's been hard, is the city's trying to hire people in this moment while also trying to deal with everything else.
Yeah.
So that said, I think the city has done a pretty good job. I think Hancock has done a good job. Hancock recently wrote a letter to the Archdiocese, who oversees the Catholic Church, to say, hey, can you guys help us out? Like, I know you've got a facility on the north side, Little Sisters of the Poor building. Maybe we could put some folks in there. Like, the city's trying.
Yeah, he's clearly paying attention.
Yeah, but the controversy is now like, what is Polis doing here? And I thought this quote from Denverite was really interesting. They talked to a gentleman who was staying at one of these rec center shelters, and he said that word has spread that Denver is a safe place to go. So migrants like him have arrived in El Paso and then set their sights north. So again, this is where it's just cloudy. Like, how are folks here? What is this push? If it's not, a Republican governor sending folks this way, what's really going on? And I think that's what we're going to be watching to just seeing what happens.
Yeah, the response from our elected leaders is definitely something we're going to be paying attention to. But Brie, I think what a lot of people want to know right now is how can they help?
Yeah, so we'll put a link in the show notes to where you can donate, where if you've maybe got some time, you could volunteer. Also, again, the city is still hiring folks. So if you're looking for a job, this might be something. Bilingual people are also in special demand for this, Spanish-speaking people. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. This episode is brought to you by the How to Buy a Home podcast. Oh, I was just looking at multi-million-dollar listings in other neighborhoods late last night. Belcaro had some really beautiful houses. You could put my whole house in their living room kind of size. I'm really debating on the pool. Do you really want a pool in Colorado? That's why I keep recommending the How to Buy a Home podcast. Host David Sidoni has been the undisputed first-time homebuyer authority since 2005. And he has helped so many listeners close on houses they thought were impossible, even as things went nuts in the last couple of years. David can guide you through next steps that are right for you, whether you're planning to buy a home now or 5 years from now. The maintenance on a pool reminds me of like people that have an aquarium. That's a lot of work for a minimal amount of return. 2023 is a new year. Start it off right at howtobuyahome.com and make this the last year you rent. Find How to Buy a Home on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, Paul, I have to say this story does not surprise me whatsoever, but I would love for you to give us the lowdown on what is going on with the Suncor Oil Refinery and the EPA.
Well, this one is also sort of connected to the cold snap that we had, those extreme low temperatures last week. Although there's a few reasons why Suncor has been in the news, and that's just one of them. The weather sparked an issue at the refinery in Commerce City, the big refinery that we're always talking about with air quality issues in that neighborhood. Yes. So Suncor announced on the 28th of December that refinery had to close due to the extreme and record-setting weather. They didn't mention in their announcement that there had been a couple of fires at the facility. We don't know if they were in connection to the weather, but there was one on December 24th that actually injured 2 workers. And unfortunately, they're going to have to close for like 3 months, maybe more. They said the end of Q1. So that's like March, April-ish. And that's a big deal because I didn't realize this, but that refinery supplies as much as 40% of the gasoline used by drivers in the Denver metro area, according to the Denver Business Journal. So this is going to have like a pretty significant impact on the price of fuel at a time when, everybody's already paying out the wazoo to heat their homes and to, power their cars and everything else we need this stuff for.
I just want to say, I don't want to say like, is there a bright side to this? But I do wonder if something like the pandemic effect on our transit, if something like that could happen where folks are forced to change their behaviors. Like, could this push us into a new era of transit when we talk about single car drivers and like, I don't know. I don't want to say like this is a good thing.
Are there cheaper ways to...
Yeah. Are there cheaper ways to get around? Also, will this show, I'm sure they'll be monitoring it. I know there are nonprofit groups monitoring it. Will this show an improvement in our air quality when we don't have this refinery running for a couple months?
It's giving us a natural experiment there. Yeah. So yeah, it could be interesting what happens. At the same time, curious timing, on the exact same day that Suncor announced this shutdown, the EPA actually announced that they're going to be investigating how Colorado regulates these industrial air polluters like Suncor, and specifically allegations about discrimination against Hispanic people and other racial minorities. And so this brings up this same question again of like air quality versus cost of living. And it seems like a really difficult problem to figure out. And I know our air regulators have been in the news a lot lately because of the revolving door between the people who work in those offices and people who work in industry.
Also, I feel like this is a little bit of deja vu. Didn't Suncor get in trouble not that long ago for, or maybe no, was it the air quality folks?
They were regulators.
That were measuring. Yeah. So I don't know. This industry, I feel like this industry has been for many decades, but is definitely screaming for a change, a bigger shift.
It's another one where I'm left with more questions than answers after these two most recent stories.
I'm also curious how this will play out with the mayor's race. Are we going to see more conversations about climate change? You know, I mean, it's an ongoing issue. I don't know if it's going to be a big enough issue that folks jump onto it. I know we've got a couple candidates, like Ian Thomas Tafoya obviously has done a lot of climate action work. But I don't know. It's just something I'm thinking about going into the new year that is not that far out. Are we going to be talking about quality of life for folks, especially in and around these places?
I mean, we're definitely going to be talking about cost of living. We're definitely going to be talking about the price of natural gas and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The environment stuff, I don't know how much power a mayor has over that. Although I would expect them to be talking about it.
Think about our Office of Climate Action and Resiliency, right? I mean, I think they've been doing some really big stuff. Again, we could talk about the e-bike thing. That took hold for a reason. People were interested. I don't think it's out of the realm of the mayor's office to make some shifts, even if they're smaller. I don't know. Just something to think about when we're looking at our candidates and our options.
Definitely. Well, Bree, there was some sad news. Do you want to talk about Joyce Meskis?
Yeah, so Joyce Meskis is obviously best known as the owner of the Tattered cover for decades, and she passed away over the holiday. So for a little bit of background, most people are familiar with this, but she purchased the Tattered cover in 1974 after another gentleman had started it about 3 years ago, but she transformed it into this nationally known hub for, I mean, it was the book reader's bookstore. And it to me, it put Denver on the map in a really interesting way. Before we were really known as a cool city, we had like a New York level bookstore in the Tattered cover. I have so many fond memories of the Cherry Creek location. And I've said this before, but I'm an avid magazine reader. I'm not as much a book reader. And the Tattered cover was the place. I could get every like British music magazine. I could get every beauty magazine. I remember spending hours there reading and spending a lot of money on, like spending all of my babysitting money on magazines at the Tattered cover. But it was such a special place. I mean, it still is a special place. She sold it several years ago. It's changed hands since then. But, the other thing that Joyce is known for beyond expanding this book empire, also, there's a reason we have an independent bookstore in our airport because of someone like Joyce Meskis. She was also known as sort of a supporter of free speech. This went back all the way to the 80s when she was a plaintiff in a new state law that was going to ban the display of books and magazines that were, quote, harmful to minors because of sexual content. So she did this through the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. She was a supporter of the ability for folks to buy whatever books they want and the bookstore stay out of that business. Like, it's not their business what you buy. It is up to you. And you have the freedom and choice to purchase whatever you would like. And she refused to track it. She refused to give information about who her customers were. And yeah, so for being just an independent bookseller, a person that runs a business, she was very politically minded.
Yeah.
And I thought that made her an interesting figure in Denver.
And willing to be unpopular, It sounds like, which I feel like is a real Denver value, that like maverick instinct. I associate that with this city. And I appreciate that about people like Joyce.
Yeah, and I was going to say maybe that's partially why she did so well here. Was she had the environment to say, this is my opinion and this is how I'm going to go about it. But overall, I think she did wonderful work. I think the Tattered cover is an institution for a reason, and it's because she ran her bookstore as she did for decades, and it's still here today, thriving as ever.
Well, speaking of downtown, there is one other piece of sad news. I don't know if you saw this. This didn't make the front page of the Denver Post or anything, but I saw online a few days ago that the McDonald's on 16th Street Mall, they put up a sign on the door that said they're closing permanently.
Wow.
That McDonald's that, I don't know, I've walked past a billion times. I'm sure listeners have too. Bree, do you have much of a relationship with that particular McDonald's?
No, it's on the 16th Street Mall. So no, but it is surprising to me whenever a McDonald's closes, right? Like how aren't they always busy? Like the one by my house always has
that one was such a flashpoint.
Yeah. Well, I think the context here is like that was a McDonald's on the 16th Street Mall. So that means a lot of things. I don't know. It's complicated for me. I feel like.
I mean, it's a place that attracts all different kinds of people. I went in there once to buy a soda or something, and I got to say, it wasn't the most comfortable experience. There was people using it. I mean, it's one of those businesses that kind of operated like a shelter for people experiencing homelessness or
right.
people who didn't really have another place to go. And that meant that, things happened there that weren't always the nicest to be around.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. It's a place to charge your phone. It's a place to get out of the elements. It's a place to maybe get a meal for relatively cheap in a city that is getting more and more unaffordable. So can't hate on McDonald's for that. I mean, it's a complicated thing to think about this global entity, McDonald's. But at this place, in this time, in this location, it served a lot of purposes. So I assume that had a lot to do with why they closed, but I also don't know.
I assume so too. When I saw this news, I thought this is kind of a bellwether for the economic and political situation downtown. I mean, if you know the famous Big Mac index, like this way of looking at purchasing power around the world in different countries is to look at how much a Big Mac costs.
Oh.
So I don't know. That's where my mind went. There's to take that and apply it to downtown. How downtown must not be doing great if even a McDonald's can't survive there anymore.
Yeah, that is a really interesting barometer of what downtown looks like. A conversation I know we are going to be having a lot in 2023, just as we did in 2022.
Absolutely.
Well, Paul, this has been so helpful. Thanks for chatting with me about what our city's been up to.
Yeah, thank you, Bree. I appreciate it as well.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell Broncos interim head coach Jerry Rossberg about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter, Hey Denver, by texting Denver to 66866. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya!
Okay, I just hit record. I'm rolling.
Did you just hit record on a tape player? I thought I heard it beep.